Hey guys, I'm Midnight Siren, and recently I've been really into Game of Thrones. I've watched the TV series up to the current season, and I've read the first book of the Song of Ice and Fire series, Game of Thrones, and now I'm working on Clash of Kings. Now, while I've theorized this myself, I did not put the hardcore work into getting Cites for this theory. Instead, I just read an article for all my information. A link to it will be in the description. Now, in this epic series, one of the favorite characters is certainly Jon Snow. He's definitely one of mine. However, he is also one of the most mysterious, at least in terms of his heritage. Still, there is one prevailing theory of his true birth. At face value, Jon Snow is simply the bastard of Eddard Stark and an unknown mother. However, this theory states that Jon Snow's true parents are Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, and Rhaegar Targaryen, the heir to the Iron Throne, before the war. The core story of this theory states that Lyanna and Rhaegar were in love. Rhaegar was in a political marriage with the Princess of Dorne, Elia Martell, of whom he had two children, Rhaenys and Aegon. Lyanna was betrothed to Robert Baratheon. However, in a tournament at Harrenhal, the two met. It is stated in Game of Thrones that when he won the jousting contest, he, quote, urged his horse past his own wife, to lay the Queen of Beauty's laurel in Lyanna's lap, a crown of winter roses as blue as frost. From then on, the two were in love. They ran off together to the Tower of Joy in Dorne, but when the war began, Rhaegar had to return home, leaving Lyanna behind and pregnant. Her brother Ned showed up after she had given birth to Jon. She was dying, and the Targaryens had lost the war. To protect her Targaryen-blooded son, note that Rhaegar's baby was killed so that he was no threat to the throne, she gave him to her brother, making him promise to never tell whose he truly was. Therefore, Eddard raised Jon Snow as his own bastard, never speaking of the boy's true parents. The story, as told throughout the book, is portrayed quite differently. As told, Lyanna was apparently taken hostage by Rhaegar and held in the tower. She was ill with a fever and had slipped too far by the time Ned arrived to save her. There is no doubt that Robert Baratheon loved Lyanna Stark. He constantly talked about her to Ned. When he visited Winterfell at the beginning of the book, the first thing he does is pay respects to her grave. He compares Cersei to her often. However, one quote from Game of Thrones shows Lyanna's contempt for Robert. Robert will never keep to one bed, Lyanna had told him at Winterfell, on the night long ago when their father had promised her hand to the young Lord of Storm's End. I hear he has gotten a child on some young girl in the Vale. Ned had held the babe in his arms. He could scarcely deny her, nor would he lie to his sister. But he assured her that what Robert did before their betrothal was of no matter, that he was a good man and true, who would love her with all his heart. Lyanna had only smiled. Love is sweet, dearest Ned, but it cannot change a man's nature. It is not far-fetched to believe that two people in an unwanted relationship would find comfort in each other. Robert seems to hate Rhaegar greatly. However, most of the other characters seem to understand that the Targaryen prince wasn't such a bad person. Jorah Mormont, Barristan Selmy, and even Eddard himself can be quoted speaking highly of his manner. For someone who is known as honorable, it is hard to believe that he would hold an innocent woman captive. Ned remembered the moment when all the smiles died. When Prince Rhaegar Targaryen urged his horse past his own wife, the Dornish princess Elia Martell, to lay the Queen of Beauty's laurel in Lyanna's lap. He could see it still. A crown of winter roses as blue as frost. Winter roses are stated throughout the book as being Lyanna's favorite. However, they are often mentioned at odd times. Anytime Eddard thinks of his sister, he recalls blue roses, linking up to the crown that Rhaegar first gave her. Ned's final memory of Lyanna's death states, Ned remembered the way she had smiled then, how tightly her fingers had clutched his as she gave up her hold on life, the rose petals spilling from her palm, dead and black. It is possible that Rhaegar kept her stocked with roses to make her feel better during his absence and her pregnancy. When Eddard storms the Tower of Joy to save his sister, as shown in his dream in Game of Thrones, he notes three present Kingsguard: Sir Arthur Dayne, Sir Gerald Hightower and Sir Oswell went. However, there are no royals in the tower at the time, and the Kingsguard are solely there to protect the royalty. At that time, Rhaegar and Aerys, the king, would have been dead, so why aren't the Kingsguard protecting Daenerys and Viserys, the last living Targaryens? Maybe because Lyanna was carrying one of the last Targaryens. It is also notable that Arthur Dayne was one of Rhaegar's closest friends, so who better to trust that secret to? Had Lyanna simply been a prisoner, as in the told story, it would have been simple guards to protect the tower, not someone as important as Kingsguard, who would surely be off protecting the royalty. When Ned reaches his sister, he remembers it smelling of flowers and blood. A fever, as she was said to have died from, causes no blood. However, childbirth does. The biggest trail of proof to me comes in the form of Eddard's dreary stay in the dungeon towards the end of Game of Thrones. Out of all the things he could think of during his time there, what is most prominent on his mind is his sister Lyanna and his bastard son Jon Snow. He is racked with guilt throughout the time, and most of it concerns Jon. The thought of Jon filled Ned with a sense of shame, a sorrow too deep for words. If only he could see the boy again, sit and talk with him. Why, exactly? The most probable being the truth about his mother. At the beginning of the story, Jon was most curious about the truth, but Eddard would not tell him. After Eddard dies, Bran has a raven dream of which he sees his father's ghost in the crypt. Bran says that he was sad about something that has to do with Jon. Even after death, he was troubled with the secret he had kept. His stay in the dungeon is also the time that Ned reflects on the time that Rhaegar and Lyanna reportedly fell in love. It is also the time that the words, "Promise me, Ned," is repeated over and over again. "I was with her when she died," Ned reminded the king. She wanted to come home, to rest beside Brandon and father. He could still hear her at times. "Promise me," she had cried, in a room that smelled of blood and roses. "Promise me, Ned." The fever had taken her strength, and her voice had been faint as a whisper. But when he gave his word, the fear had gone out of his sister's eyes. While that was his true explanation for the promise, it makes no sense that one would be afraid of not being buried with her family. It also makes no sense that Eddard would be so troubled of the promise as the fevered repeat of the sentence proves, especially since she was buried where he had, quote, promised her. A promise of keeping her Targaryen son's birthright a secret, or else the result of the baby's death, would be something to fear. However, it was a promise that challenged him. His honor was questioned because he had to claim him as his own bastard, making him look unfaithful to Catelyn, when in fact he was. In addition, he had to lie to everyone, including his own wife, in order to keep the secret best protected. The lies racked him with guilt often. Troubled sleep was no stranger to him. He had lived lies for 14 years, yet they still haunted him at night. At that time in the book, Jon would have been 14 years old. He had lived lies, telling the world Jon was his own son, when in truth, he was his nephew. Jon was always regarded oddly by Eddard. He never really called him his son. In place he would say, "my blood," to which Jon would be, but only as a nephew. In the books, Jon and Arya are said to look alike. Arya is said to also look like Lyanna. Therefore, Jon would in turn look like Lyanna. When Eddard is asked about his bastard's mother by Robert, it goes in Game of Thrones, "You told me once. Was it Meryl? You know the one I mean, your bastard's mother. Her name was Wylla," Ned replied with cool courtesy, "and I would sooner not speak of her." "Wylla, yes," the king grinned. "She must have been a rare wench if she could make Lord Eddard Stark forget his honor, even for an hour." "You never told me what she looked like." Ned's mouth tightened in anger. "Nor will I. Leave it be, Robert. For the love you say you bear me, I dishonored myself and I dishonored Catelyn, in the sight of gods and men." Wylla was a wet nurse serving House Dane at the time. She is usually regarded as his named mother, but it is more than possible that she was in on the secret in order to protect Jon. She was a wet nurse, after all. It is notable that Eddard doesn't directly say that he was his bastard's mother. He simply answers Robert's question, saying that Wylla was the one Robert was referring to. There are two other incredibly supportive quotes of this theory. In Game of Thrones, Robert says to Ned Rhaegar, "Rhaegar won, damn him. I killed him, Ned. I drove that spike right through his black armor into his black heart, and he died at my feet. Yet somehow he still won. He has Lyanna now, and I have her." To me, this means that in death, Rhaegar and Lyanna are together in love. Robert loved Lyanna with all his heart and hated Rhaegar for taking her from him. But with them both dead, he realizes sadly that he still lost her to him. In Clash of Kings, Daenerys, while in the House of the Undying, sees a vision of a blue flower grew from a chink of a wall of ice and filled the air with sweetness. Rhaegar was Daenerys' brother, and she often thinks and dreams about him throughout the series. The blue flower heavily references the flowers that Lyanna loved, that Rhaegar gave to her, and the wall of ice being nothing more than the wall that Jon Snow walks as a man of the Night's Watch. One very final note being the title of the book series itself, A Song of Ice and Fire. As one of the main characters, Jon is the son of ice, Lyanna, the Lady of the North where the snow always falls, and fire, Rhaegar, the embodiment of dragons. While no word-for-word stated evidence reveals that Jon Snow's true parents are Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, there are heavy and undisputable hints for the truth. Subtle storytelling is always the best, anyway. George R.R. Martin states that in the future we will find the real truth of his birth. But until then, we have this very plausible and very long theory. This has been my first non-gaming theory, and while I plan to stick to gaming, I will every now and then change it up and cover something like this. But for now, rate and comment, subscribe for more theories and creepypasta readings. I'm Midnight Siren, and I will see you next time. Yet somehow, Dany would picture it the way it had been. Her brother Rhaegar battling the usurper in the bloody waters of the Trident, and dying for the woman he loved. Rubies flew like drops of blood from the chest of a dying prince, and he sank to his knees in the water, and with his last breath murmured a woman's name.